e outros que estão por ser. O trem de alta velocidade, também devemos ter uma licitação nos próximos meses. A parte portuária. Esses investimentos estão todos escritos aqui e os contatos também para o acesso a informações mais detalhadas, nós colocamos aqui os contatos do Ministério do Planejamento. Então, eu gostaria agora de abrir para as demais apresentações. O Gustavo gostaria de iniciar.
Good morning, Mr. Eduardo Serino, moderator. Good morning to the other panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very honored to be here in such a distinguished company. Over the past 15 years, since the promulgation of the bidding law and the law that regulates administrative proceedings in Brazil, public contracts have established a fair balance and guaranteed more transparency between contracting parties. Since the moment Brazil was chosen to hold the next World Cup and the Olympic Games of 2016, a countdown has begun to implement and build a vast infrastructure network between the cities that will host the event, as well as the cities less than 350 kilometers of them. The moment of great investments in infrastructure that Brazil is experiencing is due not only to solid economic growth, but also due to consolidation of a government system of acquisition as a result of a long maturing process. Besides, the understanding of the courts started to emphasize the balance between the contracting parties, and it has evolved into the application of several principles that before were applicable only to private contracts, which means more security when contracting Brazilian government. These factors, allied to the necessity of hiring with more efficiency, speed, and to the policy of state investments decentralization, resulted in the differentiated regime for public contract and in the implementation of public-private partnerships in Brazil. In the next few minutes, we will deal with the advantages, guarantees, and strategies to minimize risks when contracting with Brazilian government. PPP in Brazil is a different modality of concession, which rules two different types of contract. The first type is the administrative concession. This is the type of concession of public services that does not exploit any kind of economic activities, which means the activities that the government uses directly or indirectly. Even if it involves the construction or supplying of goods. An example of it's a prison construction and management or a public hospital construction and management. The second type is the sponsored concession. In this type of concession, the government contributes with part of the fees which users have to pay. This is the concession of public services that are not economically viable just by the collection of fees. This is a different type of concession because the government pays part of the fees. A good example of this is a construction and operation of an electricity generator plant. Let's talk about risk division. The Brazilian PPP law establishes the risk division in business between private and public sector. This division brings more stability to the trade. The private partner has more security with the public partner obligation because the government assumes the prejudices of the trading. Thus, a good definition of a risk matrix in the bidding announcement and in its contract will represent gain for both parties. The main use of PPP provision of public services that are not economically self-sustained, which requires the government contribution as well as the collection of user fee when it's appropriate. Therefore, the Brazilian PPP establishes the government consideration of partial or total service cost and the sharing of risks. This type of trade is attractive to private sector because in most cases it guarantees an excellent return of investment. By the way, in an innovative way, to ensure the payment of government obligations, the Brazilian PPP law establishes guarantees to the private partner. Under the financial aspect, the possibility of guarantees concession is an essential condition to a good partnership. PPP involves a great amount of money, and the return is not immediately, as it's a long-term contract. It's important to emphasize that the guarantee established by the Brazilian government offers advantage to the private partners. The liquidity and strength offered by the government means better conditions to negotiate the bank spread loans, since this is directly linked to the risk of the trade. With the concession of better guarantees, the private partner has more security to be part of the trade. And it's important to emphasize that Brazil had already created the Guarantee Fund of Public-Private Partnership, adopted all over the country. It's good to mention that all 26 states and federal districts they put their money there. This is very attractive guarantee modality because of the liquidity of the assets. Now let's talk about framework of indicators performance. The framework of performance indicators, it's a tool that rates the monthly performance in the contract execution. This framework was developed by the contractor related to the services provided by the contracted. It's composed of a set of indicators established in the contract. This framework can be influenced by values of financial compensation of government due to contract. Let's talk about how to overcome the PPP risks. Well, the PPP contracts, as it was described, should comply with major complexity objects that demand long time in execution. In these terms, every planning phase must be well conceived, from the management policy planning to the execution of each contract. Definition of the financial and economic equation, lead time, and action strategies. It's important to focus that the risk involved in a contract of this size have more significant impact, needing well-defined planning actions. How we can do this? 3 ways. Setting priorities, with a well-fitted project execution planning, and with consistency of legal contractor relationship. I'd like to highlight this last one because as a long-term contract, the concession will face some government changes, which may also include strategic and priority changes. Therefore, the contract must be protected against policy interventions with solid legal basis that preserves its effectiveness and its economical financial equation. A consistency protection might be made by the contractual guarantees of both sides represent a good option to preserve the contractual relationship. Let's talk about the differentiated regime for public contracting. In Brazil we call RDC. Well, facing the necessity to expedite the contracted required to the realization of the next World Cup and 2016 Olympic Games, the law that establishes the differentiated regime for public contract was approved. The differentiated regime for public contract is a modality of contracting services and goods by the public administration, and it will be applied to biddings and contracts which involve three situations: execute the Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games of 2016, execute 2013 FIFA Cup of Confederations, and also 2014 FIFA World Cup, and the last one, and most important for the investors, that execute public infrastructure in the cities that will host the event, and also that are less than 350 kilometers from the host cities of the mentioned events. One of the main improvements that differentiated regime for public contract brought is that technological innovation can be decisive to sign a contract. That's because it has been highlighted as one of the goals of differentiated regime for public contracting, and also a goal to be considered in the specification of the object. As a rule, the specification of services and objects shall comply with the requirements settled in the Brazilian bidding law. This law requires technological progress as a duty of public administration. Usually, the public manager is more concerned ensuring isonomy between competitors than contracting products with more advanced technology. But with the insertion of this new goal, the object specification in the bidding announcement is influenced by the justifications that even thought restricts the competition. And another innovative device is good to mention the total piece work. The total piece work was established to situation that's unable to develop through the government, only for it. In Brazil, basic and executive projects should be bidding by the best technique or the best technique and price in competition or public contest modalities. In practice, projects planning service are bidding as other common service, occasioning the contract of low quality products and force constant change during the contract execution. Total piece work defined in the differentiated regime for public contract allows the alliance between the expertise of private sector and the functions of the public administration, allowing private companies to prepare the design and execute it as well. This was strictly forbidden in the Brazilian bidding law, but it was authorized because of the serious need in the drafting of the basic project. It's not possible to public managers master the necessary knowledge to produce an entire project with the level of detail that law and control agencies requires, because of complexity and technological innovations of the market. I'd like to go to the last point, that is contracts of efficiency. Another innovation that RDC allows is a special remuneration arrangement which divides the profit or saving offering to the contracting due to the service provided. This type of remuneration led the contracts to be called performance contract or efficiency contract. The conventional general law was changed by the following criteria that the new rule approves: remuneration based on the contract company performance, performance associated with targets and standards of quality, performance associated to environmental sustainability criteria, and lead time. I'd like to finish highlighting two things. Many businessmen and big companies, when thinking in Brazil, immediately think in São Paulo. Well, São Paulo is an international destination and has maybe the best restaurants in the country. But companies concerned with signed contracts with federal government should go to Brasilia. I explained. The reason is very simple. Brasilia is where decisions are taken. I also would like to do my 10 seconds of advertising. telling that our law office is specialized in public contracts, and our differentiated because we are formed by members that work on the government. Thank you.
Muito obrigado, Gustavo. Interessante essa abordagem da PPP, um instrumento que vem ganhando peso no total de projetos de infraestrutura e outras áreas também no país. E então é algo interessante ser colocado para potenciais investidores aqui, porque sem dúvida alguma novas oportunidades vão estar surgindo a cada dia. Nós temos estados que estão mais à frente nessa modalidade no país, como São Paulo e Minas, e tem mais algum? O Distrito Federal também tem introduzido o instrumento dentro das suas possibilidades, mas sem dúvida alguma a tendência é de crescimento dessa modalidade no país. Bom, dando sequência agora, eu gostaria de chamar o Sr. Charles Stang para fazer sua apresentação.
Well, thank you very much. Thank the organizers for inviting me to participate in such a prestigious event. I'm surrounded by lawyers here in this panel, so I won't touch anything about the legal system. In fact, what I would like to do is focus on the need for infrastructure in Brazil, the lack of internal savings in Brazil to finance all the infrastructure that Brazil needs to develop, to fully reach the potential of Brazilian development. And also, I would like to focus on the role that the Chinese companies can play in helping Brazil develop its infrastructure. And with this development of the infrastructure, Brazil, which is a country that offers stability, both political and financial and economic stability, it's a country that's, the growing importance of Brazil will continuously be felt as Brazil is one of the major food providers in the world that is hungry for calories. China needs to guarantee its strategic resources. It needs to guarantee its strategic resources in petroleum, in minerals, and in food security. And Brazil is an ideal partner for China. China must declare its strategic resource independence. It can no longer continue to only depend on a few multinationals who control the petroleum resources, the mineral resources, and the grains that the Chinese people need to survive on. China only has 140 million square hectares of agricultural land. Brazil uses today about 80 million hectares of land. It has 200 million hectares of pasture for cattle, because there's more cattle than people in Brazil. And Brazil can insert another 140 million hectares for agricultural production of unused land. You know, as I said, you know, our chamber represents the government of Pará State, which is 1.25 million square kilometers, 15% of Brazilian territory. We represent Pernambuco, and we would like to offer to the Chinese companies the free use of agricultural land as long as you produce you can just keep on using the land. If you stop production, then of course the governments would take back the land. But if you continue production, you can freely use agricultural land for as long as you produce. So, this will help China also. Since, Brazil has a certain amount of restriction for agricultural land over 5,000 hectares, we have devised this plan to offer to the Chinese companies to take advantage of Brazil's land and water resources for food production. Well, some of these charts you have seen before, so I'll just skip through them very quickly. The comparison of the Brazilian and the Chinese economies. The trade balance, as you know, Brazil had a surplus of $11.5 billion in the trade with China last year. In 2011 and 2010, Brazil had a $4.2 billion surplus in its trade relationship with China. And when I talk about the massive infrastructure projects that Mr. Eduardo Celino and other speakers from APEX has shown, we're also talking about the role for the financial institutions in Hong Kong to package all the funding that is necessary for all these investments. You can see that, like I said, Brazilian surplus with China has been growing, and last year reached the incredible amount of 11.5 billion. And if you consider the total trade volume last year of $77 billion, plus the direct investment volume that China is today Brazil's largest single direct foreign investor, we will basically reach over $100 billion of economic relationship between the two giants, the giant of South America and the giant of Asia. These are some of the costs in Brazil. Now, what is very, very encouraging is that the government of President Dilma is one of the first Brazilian governments to fully recognize the Brazil cost and is really making a large effort to reduce the taxes, to reduce the interest rate, and to reduce the cost of labor. So this is one very positive action by President Dilma's government, because one of the major costs that impedes Brazilian competitiveness around the world is precisely the Brazil cost. Well, I think most of these figures you have seen before, so I won't really spend much time talking about it. Well, of course, the comparison for the infrastructure, I remember when China started in 1980 to build up its infrastructure, and China had no money whatsoever. So China started with the PPP, private-public equity participation, and invited all the foreign companies. A lot of people from Hong Kong came to invest in the infrastructure of China, and that's how China started. Now, for the sake of my lawyer panelists, I would like to advise you all that in Brazil, all the contracts talk about the legal base of the contract, of which jurisdiction of the judiciary. In China, all the contracts have arbitration chambers, rather than going to which court you should go to. And all the Chinese want to utilize the Beijing International Chamber of Commerce Arbitration Chamber, and all the Brazilians would like to use Swiss or whatever arbitration chamber, because they feel that the Beijing chamber might be in favor of the Chinese company, which isn't, as you know, the honorary president of the Beijing International Chamber of Commerce, I can guarantee you that that is not the case. But anyhow, our chamber, our Brazil-China chamber, is going to establish several arbitration chambers in Brazil to help the Chinese and the Brazilian companies to insert in their contracts the arbitration chambers rather than just which court or which area of the judicial system you have to go to in Brazil. And we would, we'll be glad to talk to several law firms all around Brazil because we plan to establish several arbitration chambers around Brazil. Well, all these figures you have seen before. Now, the airport concessions. China has the best airports in the world today, and China was not present in the last airport bid in Brazil. So last time I mentioned to CITIC Construction, why didn't you participate? Because CITIC built, CITIC and Sinopec are excellent models of how the Chinese can participate in the infrastructures of Brazil. Sinopec built the, I think, 1,500 kilometers gas pipeline from the northeast to the southeast. They won the bid and hired the Brazilian contractors to build it out. And, CITIC Construction built the coal thermoelectric power plant in the Rio Grande do Sul, which was signed by President Dilma when she was the State Secretary of Energy in Rio Grande do Sul, the southern state of Rio Grande do Sul. And they also helped build the steel mill, the Thyssen steel mill. So, well, Brazilian ports need a lot of infrastructure improvements. Brazil, as mentioned, attracts a lot of FDI into Brazil. This list of what each one has done with each of the Chinese companies. The World Cup has been talked about. And the different sectors that the Chinese could invest in Brazilian infrastructure. Now, one article that was published by the Folha de São Paulo, which is the largest newspaper in Brazil, when President Dilma came to China, I urged her to get the Chinese, because Brazil does not have enough internal savings to finance all the necessary infrastructure work. The Chinese could certainly invest in the infrastructure work with Brazil. And I urged President Dilma when she came to China to get the Chinese to invest in the infrastructure that Brazil so desperately needs to fully realize its potential for development. And another article that was printed that I wrote for Global newspaper, and also an interview I gave to BBC World TV a few months ago, when the British reporter asked me, saying that China is becoming the new colonizer of Africa. And I said, well, I didn't say you British, but I said, the colonial masters of yesterday stripped Africa of its wealth and left Africa a lost continent. And China, because of its massive investments in African infrastructure, has transformed Africa into the continent of hope. China pays market prices, and sometimes, due to ignorance, pays above market prices. And as we all know, Africa is now one of the great hopes for emerging nations. So I'll wrap it up here. And our Brazil-China Chamber of Commerce is at everybody's disposal. We're helping right now in over more than $4.4 billion of business. Just one deal we're doing now, helping a major Brazilian financial group, is a $2.4 billion deal. We were the ones who advised Embraer to come bring their factory to China. We organized a visit of the chairman of Itaú, which is the largest bank in South America, to come to China. We opened Sino Steel in Brazil. We took Jianghuai Automobiles, Jack Motors, to Brazil, which is a great success. The most successful Chinese brand in Brazil. We're taking steel mills from China where there's an excess to Brazil where there's a lack of steel mills and other major projects. So we're, again, as I said, at your disposal. Thank you.
Obrigado, Charles. Congratulo também o trabalho que você, pelo trabalho que a Câmara vem desenvolvendo no Brasil. Sem dúvida, você é uma das referências na área do relacionamento Brasil-China, na área econômica lá, e suas colocações contribuem bastante para o aprofundamento. E esperamos ver os investimentos chineses na infraestrutura, porque sem dúvida eles vão, com o crescimento do aprofundamento do relacionamento econômico, inclusive na área de comércio, né, que é bastante forte. Hoje a China é o principal parceiro comercial do Brasil. As intervenções, a participação chinesa na infraestrutura vai contribuir até para o próprio negócio em si, das empresas chinesas, pela redução de custos que essas obras vão proporcionar para escoamento, seja ele das commodities ou da produção de maior valor agregado. Bom, eu convido então agora o Jonas a fazer a sua exposição.
Thank you, everybody. My presentation aimed to demonstrate an overview about the real cases in Brazil in field of PPP and the practical aspects in these projects. For example, how to take part in the public biddings related to these partnerships, questions, for example, about risks, the solution of the risks, financing options, and new opportunities. First, real cases. The examples that will be mentioned are just some among several and prove that Brazil has specific legislation and expertise for projects in many business fields, in different amounts of resources invested, different criteria for remuneration, and different duration, the term of the contracts. Examples: São Paulo Metro Line for $1.2 billion, 30 years of concession. Belo Monte Hydroelectric, $15 billion, 35 years. First in transport, second in energy. Guarulhos Airport, $90 billion, 20 years of concession. And in other area, is important to understand this scenario. Brasilia Airport, $2.2 billion, to 25 years. As other example in area of infrastructure transport. Campinas Airport, $2 billion, 35 years. São Paulo Beltway, $1 billion, 30 years. A different other example in different area. And I highlight in Guarulhos we have the most important airport in passengers, and Campinas we have cargo. The focus in Campinas is cargo, import, export products, different projects, different characteristics. In other area, prison complex Belo Horizonte, 120 million US dollars, 27 years. In health area, hospital of suburb Salvador, 52 million of US dollars, 10 years. And other area, in IT, data center, Banco do Brasil and Caixa Econômica Federal, that is banks of the government. The amount 500 million US dollars. The term 15 years is a different project. Highway MG 050 360 million US dollars, 25 years, is a different project. This case is a project of state Minas Gerais. In Rio de Janeiro, Maravilha Port, 3.8 billion US dollars, 15 years. In Salvador, other different project, submarine outflow, 310 million US dollars, 18 years. Next, different areas, Stadium, Mineirão, Belo Horizonte, 350 million US dollars, 25 years. Stadium Arena das Dunas in Natal City, in Natal, is 210 million US dollars, 20 years. And other different area, irrigation project Pontal, Petrolina, 99 million US dollars, 25 years. These examples, the objective to demonstrate these examples is to make a reflection. In each case, it's necessary to understand the focus of activity. Each project has your specific time to return of the investment. The cost is differentiated in airports, ports, health area, and we have different realities, different times to return of the investment. It's important to understand and make a comparison of the numbers. It's different areas, different terms, different amounts, different cities, different characteristics. The key of the success is understand the best moment to work in one on another project. And in Brazilian legal system, we have basic principles. First, the federal law establishes the base of the system, but states and municipalities need to establish its local laws. Different rules in relation to the general law of buildings and concessions law. The federal government contributes up to 1% of its annual budget in PPP projects, and states and municipalities up to 3%. The contracts worth more than 20 million reais. Reais in US dollar is 2, so is 40 million US dollars. Is the minimum amount to PPP. Period of duration of 5 until 35 years to these contracts. The project must have a prior technical, legal, and economic financial evaluation to confirm its viability. The project may involve construction, operation, and maintenance services, sharing of the gains from the reduction of the credit risk, the payment of counterpart by the public partner, state, municipality, for example, guarantee of payment of counterpart by the guarantee fund created for this purpose, Creation of the special proposed entity SPA is mandatory in all PPPs. Creation of managing agency of public-private partnerships. Today, the opportunities is very visible in groups, the teams in states, in municipalities, and in the cities, local committees in this area. Private partners remuneration is linked to the performance standards. The focus is results. The participation of foreigners. The participation of foreigners is allowed and welcome. It is very important the participation with new technologies. Foreigners may suggest new projects of PPP for the Brazil. If you have a good idea to implement in Brazil, you can make a suggestion. Association with local companies increase the chance of success. Foreign documents are acceptable as equivalent to the Brazilian documents. Is allowed the work of foreign professionals on the projects. Is allowed also the participation of foreign financial participation with foreign financial resources in the projects. Is important in all cases. Observe the legal procedures in these situations. Risk and solutions. Risks and deficient studies of cost in demand may cause problems in the future contract. Deficient economic financial planning may cause losses, financial losses. Environmental issues may delay or come inviable the project. Labor issues not planned may cause strike of employees. Non-compliance with legal requirements may nullify the contract. Risk of non-payment of the counterpart by the public partner may occur in some places in smaller projects. Today, in medium and large projects, we don't have information about the problems of payment in Brazil. It's a good scenario in this material. Solutions. It's important to make a good study of market and demand. Know the focus of the project activity and costs involved. Important detailed environmental impact study. Important to consider all the rights of employees is very important. Possible contract rebalancing since fulfilled legal requirement is possible. Possible also use of legal measures to overcome problems, including problems in terms of financial questions. Financial options, how to obtain finance to these projects. As general rule, government banks can finance up to 7% of the project. It is possible to use resources for IDB, BID, IFC, BNDES, that is a Brazilian Bank of Development, and other banks and entities of cooperation in Brazil and international entities. It's possible also to obtain financing in commercial banks in national and local market. It is also possible to use resources from investment funds. Is common in Brazil. The special purpose entity serves to avoid the personal liability of investors. The project must be well planned for economic and financial sustaining in its cash flow. It is very important. Each project is auto-sustainable. Opportunities in this moment. Brazil has social, political, economic, financial, and legal stability. Some unique culture and language, and several demands for PPP projects. There are provided at least 60 new opportunities, approximately, including projects in 3 airports, more than 20,000 kilometers of highways, in addition to those related to other transportation models. Energy is a focus. sanitation, solid waste treatment, health, education, housing, citizen assistance, defense, and other fields. This is a scenario, is a good scenario to take part in this project, but it's necessary to understand the market demand and the focus in the project, the local reality and the certain opportunities. For information, we have here this project of Anshan, of our law firm, how to do government contracts in Brazil. This is a general overview about the Brazilian system in this area. Thank you very much.
Obrigado, Jonas. Você abordou aspectos interessantes aí sobre os riscos, as formas de financiamento. São todos aspectos que o investidor deve estar atento antes de se envolver com um projeto lá no país. Bom, finalmente chamamos o Hélio para participar da sua exposição.
Bom, primeiramente, desejar um bom dia a todos, agradecer a BM&F pelo convite, agradecer também a Apex pela contribuição importantíssima na realização desse evento. Com certeza uma oportunidade única para que todos nós, brasileiros, possamos vir aqui até a China e expor o que o nosso país tem a oferecer, o que o nosso país tem efetivamente para receber daqui, para fins de disponibilizar um desenvolvimento da infraestrutura como um todo no país, a fim de permitir aquilo que o brasileiro vem cobrando do governo há muito tempo. Existe uma preocupação muito grande dos brasileiros em si, e posso falar como um deles, de que toda a infraestrutura para a Copa do Mundo, Jogos Olímpicos, Paralímpicos, elas possam ser posteriormente utilizadas durante o longo do tempo, para que não seja um investimento a curto prazo, tão somente para esses eventos, mas sim que se perdurem os resultados obtidos com a realização dessas obras todas que tem sido falado ao longo desses 2 dias. Primeiramente, vamos ver aí um pouco do contexto no qual está inserida a Copa do Mundo. Serão 12 cidades-sedes, ou seja, 12 arenas, 12 estádios no qual ocorrerão os Jogos da Copa do Mundo. Em tese, seriam 12 cidades que receberão a maior parte dos turistas, a maior parte dos torcedores para esse evento. Porém, não podemos esquecer que, embora o Brasil seja um país extenso em termos territoriais, temos que, dentro dos estados, das cidades onde ocorrerão os Jogos da Copa, todas as cidades, os estados nas proximidades também participarão desses eventos, sejam como subsedes, sejam recebendo os turistas, até porque nas grandes capitais, nos grandes centros, hoje não existe estrutura viável para atender a toda a demanda. São esperados no Brasil mais de 600 mil turistas estrangeiros, ou seja, serão mais de 600 mil pessoas ingressando no país para assistir os Jogos, para gastar na economia brasileira, para injetar recursos na economia brasileira. Além disso, estima-se que mais de 3 milhões de turistas brasileiros estarão se deslocando entre as cidades sedes, a fim de assistir os Jogos e conviver durante todo o período da Copa com todos os eventos e demais festividades em decorrência do evento. Ou seja, isso implicará, pelo menos em estudos iniciais, um impacto de mais de 5 bilhões de dólares na economia brasileira por causa do turismo, ou seja, em decorrência desses 600 mil turistas estrangeiros e desses mais de 3 milhões de turistas nacionais. E uma expectativa de mais de 2 bilhões de dólares de benefícios e investimentos na economia brasileira. Aí, encarando e incluindo toda a parte de turismo, infraestrutura, economia, impostos e daí por diante. Para possibilitar o acompanhamento de vocês de algumas das obras, de algumas oportunidades e de alguns acontecimentos importantes para esse evento, que é a Copa do Mundo 2014 e preliminarmente a Copa das Confederações no ano que vem, de 2013, trago para vocês 2 sites oficiais que trazem todo o histórico desse evento, disponibilizando o andamento atual das obras, disponibilizando em que fase estão cada um dos investimentos realizados em infraestrutura. Também como é uma possibilidade para que os investidores estrangeiros possam, de modo fácil, acompanhar as oportunidades que venham a surgir para efetivamente realizar os investimentos em decorrência da Copa do Mundo de 2014. Com relação aos Jogos Olímpicos e Paralímpicos de 2016, será a primeira vez que esse evento será realizado na América do Sul. Ou seja, o Brasil terá, hoje como grande economia, hoje como uma grande força da América do Sul, será o primeiro país a receber esse grandioso evento. Motivo de orgulho para todos nós, mas também de muita responsabilidade. O Ministério dos Esportes estima que esse evento, as Olimpíadas e os Jogos Paralímpicos, implicarão num crescimento do PIB em mais de 11 bilhões de dólares. São esperados mais de 10.500 atletas, ou seja, só de atletas já é um número considerável, além dos turistas que também estarão no país para esse evento. Serão 34 centros de competição. Desses 34 eventos, desses 34 centros de competição, 18 estão prontos, dos quais 8 serão reformados, ou seja, existe ainda oportunidade de investimento nesses centros de treinamento. 7 centros de treinamento serão temporários, ou seja, serão construídos tão somente para a realização dos eventos, e 9 deles serão construídos definitivamente, posteriormente serão utilizados para outros fins esportivos. Ou seja, oportunidades e investimentos existem e aqui estamos para trazê-los a todos vocês. Trago também o site oficial do Rio de Janeiro, que disponibiliza da mesma forma como o site oficial da Copa, todo o histórico das obras, as possibilidades de investimento, as oportunidades onde efetivamente elas surgirão. Diante desse contexto factual desses 2 eventos, nós temos que considerar que, em termos de infraestrutura, o Brasil hoje devemos ser modestos e assumir que não temos condições nenhuma de suportar esses 2 eventos sem um investimento considerável. Tem o Brasil condições de fazer esse investimento por conta própria? Fica a pergunta. Em tese, com certeza, por suas próprias pernas, o Brasil não conseguirá andar a ponto de fazer esse evento de forma tal qual eles merecem ser realizados. Então, o investimento estrangeiro é importantíssimo e cabe aos brasileiros aqui buscar, aliado com a força dos estrangeiros, aliado com a tecnologia que os chineses têm a disponibilizar para o país, buscar soluções práticas, rápidas e efetivas para solucionar os problemas hoje existentes. Agora há pouco foi falado, inclusive, pelo doutor José Carlos Martins, o problema dos hotéis em São Paulo. É uma realidade, infelizmente, patente para todos nós. Se existe um grande evento hoje em São Paulo, independentemente da natureza, existe hoje a dificuldade também de se conseguir uma simples reserva de hotel. Se você não fizer uma reserva com 1 semana, 2, 3 semanas antes, você dificilmente consegue uma vaga no hotel, que é uma capital hoje importantíssima para o país. Ou seja, as oportunidades de investimento são claras e precisamos realmente atrair aqueles que pretendem participar para o desenvolvimento do país e o sucesso desses 2 eventos. Conhecendo a realidade hoje da contratação pública no país, o governo teve a preocupação de trazer o regime diferenciado de contratação, que já foi aqui exposto pelos colegas componentes do painel, porque reconheceu, em outras palavras, que a legislação atual não permite, não favorece a contratação rápida. É uma burocracia que vem atrasar os investimentos no país e trouxe, então, esse regime diferenciado de contratação. Mas o que muda, então? O processo em si, ele acaba sendo um pouco mais rápido. Por quê? Por causa de uma série de fatores. Existe uma inversão de fases durante o desenvolvimento do processo de contratação e existe também a diminuição da possibilidade de recursos das empresas que se julgam prejudicadas, tudo com a finalidade maior de agilizar o processo de contratação. Uma facilidade para os investidores estrangeiros. e que acho de extrema relevância apontar aqui é que a própria legislação do regime diferenciado de contratação prevê que o processo de licitação, o processo de contratação deve ser preferencialmente eletrônico, ou seja, não necessariamente você precisa estar pessoalmente no país para participar do processo de contratação, para tomar conhecimento do processo de contratação e efetivamente vir a ser contratado. Ou seja, a forma eletrônica priorizada permite que o investidor estrangeiro, de preferência aliado com a empresa brasileira, com o parceiro brasileiro, até pelas questões culturais aqui já expostas, é de extrema relevância para permitir essa participação direta por intermédio do processo eletrônico. O processo de contratação integrado foi uma novidade também trazida pela lei que trouxe o regime diferenciado de contratação. Por quê? Porque permite que a mesma empresa contratada para fazer o projeto básico e o projeto executivo de infraestrutura participe efetivamente da construção. Ou seja, era uma coisa até então proibida pela lei de licitações do país e que veio ser alterada pelo regime diferenciado de contratação, visando efetivamente agilizar, ou seja, aquela empresa que já elabora o projeto básico executivo, consequentemente vai conseguir desenvolver a obra com maior facilidade. E existe também a questão da remuneração variável, já exposta aqui pelo Dr. Gustavo, e existe, por fim, a pré-qualificação, que pode ser devidamente providenciada junto ao sistema de contratação do país, e aquela empresa pré-qualificada, ela já está devidamente habilitada para participar dos processos eletrônicos de contratação. Tamanha a celeridade que esse regime diferenciado de contratação trouxe, que o governo brasileiro está tentando, ainda com alguma resistência, e acredito que por conta da resistência da oposição, da própria base governista, não conseguirá implantar esse regime diferenciado de contratação nas obras do PAC, que é o nosso Programa de Aceleração do Conhecimento. Por fim, trago aqui rapidamente, e como já exposto também, em regra, quando pensamos no Brasil, o estrangeiro, quando pensa no Brasil, pensa nos grandes centros, São Paulo, Rio, e esquece os demais estados do país. Hoje o Nordeste, como já falado aqui pelo próprio Dr. José Carlos Martins, é uma realidade, acredito eu, que o local onde as maiores oportunidades de negócio podem surgir para os investidores estrangeiros. E aí, só a título de exemplo, trago o estado de Alagoas, que nos últimos anos teve um investimento de mais de 2,5 bilhões de dólares. Isso em 52 novas indústrias, 21 novos hotéis e ainda um estaleiro que está para ser instalado em uma cidade no interior do estado e que gerará toda uma demanda de investimento nas redondezas do estado. É com certeza um exemplo a ser seguido, e essa política de atração de investimentos estrangeiros tem sido a constante no Nordeste do país. Portanto, aqui fica meu conselho aos investidores: olhem para o Nordeste do país, porque com certeza novas e grandes oportunidades poderão surgir. Era o que eu tinha a considerar, agradeço a oportunidade e deixo aí meu e-mail para eventuais contatos. Obrigado.
Obrigado, Hélio, pela oportunidade de ver mais detidamente os aspectos relacionados à Copa do Mundo e Olimpíadas, dessas oportunidades, também sobre o regime de contratação e mais uma vez, por ressaltar a importância de se direcionar os olhares e a atenção para outras regiões que inclusive apresentam taxas de crescimento e de dinamismo até acima da média nacional, no caso aí citada a região Nordeste. Bom, devido ao tempo, tá bastante esgotados aqui, nós vamos pedir que as perguntas sejam direcionadas durante o coffee break, o nosso intervalo. Muito obrigado.